Voici la plateforme des professionnels du digital, la Diaspo Academy. Ici, vous retrouverez les meilleurs professionnels de la diasporama mondiale connectés sur notre plateforme. Vous allez pouvoir acquérir des formations adéquates qui feront de vous des entrepreneurs digitaux compétents. Étudiants, entrepreneurs, coachs, instructeurs et entreprises, Diaspo Academy est une opportunité pour vous. Elle vous offre la possibilité de suivre votre formation en mode virtuel à partir de chez vous, ou que vous soyez sur la planète. Toutes nos formations disponibles en ligne sont dispensées de manière interactive. Il suffit de vous inscrire et vous pourrez les suivre depuis chez vous. Au cours de la formation, vous passerez des quiz et examens selon votre parcours. En outre, à partir de votre tableau de bord, vous suivrez vos performances et progressions. Vous pourrez aussi communiquer avec vos instructeurs et recevoir des notifications. À la fin de votre parcours de formation, vous recevrez un certificat Diaspo Academy Certified. Que vous soyez débutant ou responsable d'entreprise, Diaspo Academy est une opportunité pour vous. Saisissez-la! Enfin, que vous soyez coach ou instructeur, ayez accès à un millier d'étudiants à travers notre plateforme. Merci de choisir Diaspo Academy, le meilleur choix. Pour plus d'informations, allez sur www.diaspoacademy.com. Diaspo Academy, la plateforme des professionnels du digital.
ESYDA returned to play summer clinics. Recreation, Tuesday and Thursday, 6 to 8 p.m. Travel team, EDP, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday. Time, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Free mask and water bottle. Register today at esyda.org. Email info@esyda. Phone 248-765-9369. Office 301-800-7848. Toll free 800-995-5532. Free registration for all summer clinics. All new players need buy uniforms. We're following COVID-19 soccer guidelines. Small group practice with 9 players and 1 coach. For more information, go to esyda.org.
Looking to start a rewarding career? Call Gandhi Healthcare today to earn your certification as a nursing assistant, dental assistant, pharmacy technician, phlebotomy technician, and many more. We offer no interest payment plans, scholarships, and tuition reimbursements for those that qualify. Located right in the heart of Pikesville on Reicherstown Road and McHenry Avenue in the Pikesville Shopping Center. It offers immediate access from 695, accessible to public transportation on the 83 and 89 bus line. We offer morning, evening, and weekend classes to fit your schedule. Earn your certification in as little as 5 weeks. We are now offering classes online and on-site. Hurry, classes start soon, so enroll today. Visit us online at gandhihealthcare.com or call 443-352-8030.
Do you want to promote your business? Do you want to talk about your nonprofit organization? Do you want to talk about your culture? Introducing the online web TV, Afrique Today. Fogham, where you can watch us live at the same time on 4 platforms: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and using the Afrique Today app. Download our app today for Android or Apple. Promote your business today. For more information, go to www.afriquetoday.com. Afrique Today, the best of digital TV.
Evening, and I want to welcome you to American Africans United. We have a great program for you today, and I want to thank all of our listeners who are returning. And as you know, last week we talked about reparations. You can always go back and look at our viewings on Afrique Today, and we want to thank Afrique Today for hosting this program on every weekly Friday. You'll have me, Dr. Butler, and Brother Zeke, our invisible man, as our co-host. So today, oh, go ahead. My invisible man, you want to say something really quickly?
Oh, I can't say too much because there's a protest going on as we getting started right now about a statue. So
yes, and we're gonna talk about that today.
Okay.
And so we want to welcome. We have a special guest. We are so excited to have Dr. Joseph C. Silver Sr. He is the president and founder of Silver and Associates. He's a former president of Alabama State University. He has a long list, but I'm going to say them all. He was a provost and vice president of academic affairs of Clark Atlanta University, the vice president of academic affairs of Savannah State University, the assistant vice chancellor of academic affairs of the University System of Georgia, and administrative professor of political science at Kenzie State University. We want to welcome Dr. Silver. Dr. Silver.
Doubt.
Thank you so very much for having me. I'm looking forward to being on your program this afternoon.
Wonderful. And today we are talking about some very, very important stuff. And I know you heard about the decision today, the executive order on Capitol Hill. We do want to remind people that you can call in today. Today we're going to talk about what is the real reason behind these monuments, especially these Confederate monuments that have been put up. So we're going to talk about that today and really get a little bit more history around the reason why they were established and what we need to do about it. Because what do they really, really represent? So we're very excited. We're going to show a video clipping, and Dr. Silver is going to tell us a little bit more about that. And remember, you can call in. The studio number is on your screen now. You see the studio number on your screen now. So please call in if you have questions. This is a live show, so we will be taking questions, and Dr. Silver is here to answer them. So before we go into our video, Dr. Silver, will you tell us a little bit about your background? And I know I gave all your history, where you've been, and tell us a little about yourself, though.
Well, thank you very much. Again, I'm delighted to be on your program this evening. I always tell folk I'm just a little country boy from Goldsboro, North Carolina. And I am blessed now to live in Atlanta, Georgia. And I am the president of Silver and Associates, which is a boutique kind of international consulting firm, primarily in higher education. But we do strategic planning, and also we do international linkages. I'm excited. I'm a political scientist by training, so your program is right up my alley, so to speak. And I do love to share and be a part of anything that's progressive. As you know, I travel back and forth to Africa several times a year. COVID-19 has us stationary right now, but I look forward, after the virus is over, to continue that relationship that we have with different parts of Africa, and in particular, Ghana, West Africa.
We're gonna have to go together, because Ghana is my new home, my newfound home. So we are definitely gonna have to go together. And next week we will be talking about the return. So yes, we might have you back on, because we know you're a Pan-Africanism, and you have us. We're all one. So we'd love to have you welcome back next week, as well as we talk about our next week's show will be all about the return home. We have the video upcoming. We have a video from ACLU, who's talking a little bit about the history of these monuments. So everyone, take your attention to the video now.
America is a great country, and America is a country that was founded on the premise of white supremacy and white superiority. I know you have heard in this entire debate, well, there's a difference between heritage and hate. And there's a difference between Southern culture and slavery. And the monuments are celebrating heritage. They're celebrating culture. They're celebrating Southern pride. And people have understood these code words for a long time. So, I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee. And what greets me as a citizen of Tennessee when I go to my state capital in Nashville, where my grandparents lived? Nathan Bedford Forrest. Well, he made a fortune in Memphis as a slave trader. And he was the original Grand Wizard of the KKK. He led a Confederate massacre of black soldiers and white soldiers, American soldiers, during the Civil War. And this monument wasn't put up in 1865 or 1866 with people saying he's such a hero, we have to recognize him. This monument was built in 1970, 2 years after Martin Luther King was shot in the neck just down the road from Nashville, Tennessee. And we'll come to that timing as we go through this, because the timing of these monuments, I think, suggests something that's very important in terms of understanding what they're about. When were these monuments built? There were 2 spikes between the end of the 1800s and about 1921. What else was going on at the exact same time in America? The fact that this was normal, the fact that this was behavior that didn't really shock anybody, tells you something about how deeply white supremacy has been ingrained into American culture. 1921, the black community in Tulsa, Oklahoma was one of the most prosperous communities in America, and the whites there decided they weren't gonna have it. So they simply burned it to the ground. Almost 300 people killed. That's what was going on at the exact same time. Was this explosion of Confederate monuments, an explosion of thanks and praise for people who had done nothing other than fight to maintain white supremacy and slavery. When you think about when these monuments were built and what else was going on in America, it tells you something about the motivation. So how about that second, 1947 to 1968?
Okay, we're going to come back to Dr. Silver. No, Dr. Silver, we played that clipping, and we'll see the rest of that video in a little while. But I want you to talk a little bit about more what was going on, as I mentioned, during that period of time, and also a little bit about Black Wall Street and the history of these monuments. Why? Because why should they be taken down, and why?
One of the things that we have to remember is that at the turn of the last century, it probably was one of the most progressive eras for Black Americans in the United States. It's around the time in 1875 when the 1875 Civil Rights was passed, 1868 when the 14th Amendment was passed, 1870 when the Voting Rights Act for Black folk, the 15th Amendment, was passed. So it was a very progressive time. You had Black people who were running and winning public office. And as a result of their ascendancy in terms of economics, as was talked about earlier, and also political, it was a concentrated effort to do something about it. And that do something about it was to celebrate the history of the Confederacy. There is a little known publication that was written by Charles Francis in 1906, and it was hidden from a lot of folk. It was published in the Century magazine in 1906. There was a gentleman by the name of Charles Scott who was running for public office during that time. And what he ran on was the Confederacy. And what we know that he said there in his clear explanation of what the Confederacy was about, in very clear terms, in two words that he used: white supremacy. And what he was simply saying is that we have to preserve the sanctity of the country by making sure that the former slaves did not have a place in this, and he called our country. It's very interesting to me because he used in that article some of the same language that we see the person in the White House using now in terms of preserving law and order, keeping things on the pedestal of our country, but it's code for making sure that white supremacy exists. So in my mind's eye, there is no other reason for those monuments than to perpetrate white supremacy and to remind Black folk of who they think are in charge. Now, we talk about the Wall Street massacre in, I think it was 1921.
Yes.
Yep.
What we don't talk about a lot is the Wilmington massacre in Wilmington, North Carolina, around the turn of the century. Mm-hmm. And it was a place where Black folk were thriving economically and politically. As a matter of fact, what we do know is that the Black folk held every major position in Wilmington at that time. So if you look at the history, people are referring to that particular time period as a coup d'etat, where white folk overthrowed the government that was run by Black people. And they tell me that the Wilmington River almost turned red with the number of Black folk who were killed, primarily upper middle class, business owners, homeowners, and what have you. So what we're seeing today in terms of these monuments is nothing more than a manifestation of that white supremacy, and to remind people that they want to keep this country, as they call it, pure. In the same article that I referred to earlier, they talked about what they felt were the roles and the place of Black folk. They referred to us as savages, and that we had to be dealt with. And it would be heresy to have Black people on the same plane with white people. And so just as the video depicted earlier, all of what we see in these monuments in the period of time they were built, it was built to preserve the heritage of the Confederacy. And Charles Scott, in his speech running for the office that he was running for, he said that the way we keep this country civilized is we go back and celebrate the heritage of the Confederate soldier, quote unquote. That tells me all I need to know, madam.
Yes, and I just wanted to just make a note that we have people on both sides of the coin, and I've talked to some African Americans and who have feel that, oh, it's our history, but and if we take them down, we're destroying history. Can you speak a little bit about, because I want you to talk more about just when they were putting them up. They talked about in the video the connection to what was going on during those times they put those statues up, because to me, it wasn't during that time where they were actually historical.
No, they were not historical at all. It was very intentional. When you're talking about the turn of the century, 1898 into the 1920s, remember now and recall that institutional segregation was sanctioned by this country in the 1898 decision of Plessy versus Ferguson. It said this country should be separate but equal. But we know that what they were doing was to try to keep the races separated. But we knew, just like in America in 1898, as we know in 2020, that it's not equal. And so all we see is more or less an opportunity for those who believed in white supremacy to institutionalize this. So they institutionalize it in the courts, they institutionalize it in local government, and they institutionalize it in businesses. One of the things that we see, they use the same tactics of fear and intimidation. We're hearing people talking about the protesters burning things down, and where do they get this savage mentality from? We have to remember that during this time, not only did they burn things down, white folk burned people, black people, at the stake, hung them, tried to put fear in them to make sure that they could not feel a part of this American culture. It was also during this time, during the Jim Crow era, that you saw what we see today, which is a suppression of the vote. In 1870, we said the Voting Rights Amendment was passed. But subsequent to that, we saw things like the grandfather clause. If your grandfather didn't vote, you couldn't vote. The poll tax. If you didn't pay poll taxes 3 years ago, you can't vote in this election. The literacy tests. Even though you had very well-heeled black people who could read and who could write, they couldn't pass the literacy test because it wasn't for them to pass. You fast forward to the era that we're in now, it's the same thing with a different name, voter suppression, voter suppression. And so we see in this last primary, even in Georgia, why was it in the black community that long lines were established and people couldn't vote in the wee hours of the night? I thought it was an opportunity for them to discourage folk and think that they were going to go home and not vote. But thank God for those people who stayed in line and voted. This time of the American history was a very pivotal era in history, the so-called Jim Crow era. And what we saw, it was more people, black people in public office in the Reconstruction era than it is even today, holding positions as governor, as lieutenant governor, as council persons, as senators, as representatives. But as we see this so-called heritage emanating from this period, it was based on pure hate, pure despising of a race, and white supremacy. So now as we fast forward and we see these things, it's about demographics. If you look at demographics, black folk, Hispanics, and other minorities are reproducing. Mm-hmm. And so what you see in terms of the Euro-Americans, the Europeans, they are not reproducing at the rate of these other minorities. So they can count. And what they are doing now in terms of voter suppression and some of the things and laws that they're putting in is trying to make sure that when that majority changes, that they still have the power. South Africa all over again. And so the bottom line is that we need to be ever vigilant in terms of what we do. Fast forward to the protests. I don't have any problems at all with the folk who are protesting, because guess what, Dr. Butler? I'm one of them. I've been out in Atlanta protesting. I went out with my church. I went out with the young people. But here's what I think would be a travesty. If we're out marching, and this is very different from anything that we've seen before, when you look at the protests of the 60s versus the protests now, it's not only across the country, it's not only multinational, multiracial, but it's multinational.
Yes.
And what would be a travesty is if those folk who are out there protesting, and me with them, if they're not registered to vote, and if they don't go to the polls in November to vote, then all the marching would have been in vain. All the protesting would have been in vain. I had a novel idea. I don't know if people will agree with this idea. I was saying, okay, we know where the protests are going to be because it's on social media. They tell you where to be, what time. Why don't we just decide that if it's going to start at 5 o'clock, we tell them to come at 3 o'clock and have voter registration booths right there to register those folk who are not registered to vote first, and then we go march. Because the big march is going to be the march to the polls in November.
And that is a great idea, actually having people to have registered the voter registrations out there. And I think we should put that out there. We should urge that everyone who's out there protesting and organizing these protests to please have people lined up to register people to vote, because that is the only way in this country that we will change things, is by the vote. And so we have to hold these people accountable who are organizing these rallies to do so. So before I go on, I want to actually see if we have any questions, and I want to remind people that you can also live stream this on Facebook. We're on Twitter. We're also on YouTube, and we do have a lot of people on watching. Remember, you can call in. You also can put your questions on the YouTube, and you can put your questions in the Facebook Live, and we'll get your questions answered if you can't get on the line. So on that note, what I'd like to do, I would like to show the next clipping, and then we're going to talk a little about the next clipping and some more things really revolving around this. And then I want you to get us to some next steps. We already got one step, and that one step is to get people out there to register to vote and making sure those people are accountable. Yes,
Before we go to that segment, I'd just like to mention something about the Wilmington Massacre. It was in 1898, and it was a bloody attack on the African-American community with a white mob, and they were in support of the North Carolina Democratic Party. It occurred on the 10th of November, 1898. And I just want to give you a paragraph of a report from Reverend Charles S. Morris as he talks about it. 9 Negroes massacred outright, a score wounded and hunted like partridges on the mountain. One man brave enough to fight against such odds would be hailed as a hero anywhere else, was given the privilege of running the gauntlet up a broad street where he sank ankle deep in the sand while crowds of men lined the sidewalks and riddled him with a pint of bullets as he ran bleeding past their doors. Another Negro shot 20 times in the back as he scrambled empty-handed over a fence. Thousands of women and children fleeing in terror from their humble homes in the darkness of the night. And it goes on. So it's not a pretty picture.
The point I'm making to you, sir, earlier was that in that city, Black folk had the economic control of that city in 1898.
Yes,
they
sir.
controlled the economics, they controlled the newspapers, they controlled the grocery stores, and they controlled the politics. They had the majority vote on the council. That's why if you read the history, they say there's only been one time in American history that there was a coup d'etat.
That's correct.
It was Wilmington, North Carolina, 1898.
Yes,
That's
sir.
a fact. That's a fact. Thank you for giving us that additional information too, to back up what I'm saying.
I just, for, the invisible man got to say something.
No, thank you. So we're gonna show the next clip of the video and finish this video off so you can see a little bit more about why these statues need to be taken down.
One thing that people forget about our history is that Reconstruction after the Civil War was actually working. There were over 2,000 black elected officials in America. Businesses that blacks were starting to take hold. And in 1877, I think it was Grover, I can't remember the president, but he got elected and basically said, I'm withdrawing the troops. In 1876, there were 125,000 black registered voters in Louisiana. In 1878, that number dropped to 5,000. And if you're wondering about the flag, it had essentially been dead and buried until 1948 when Strom Thurmond brought it back with the Dixiecrat Party. And once again, they are telling us as clearly as they can what they are about and why they're waving that flag. The party's purpose was clear. We stand for segregation of the races. This is from the editor of the Augusta, Georgia Courier in 1951. Folks, they are saying it as plainly as they can. And yet we are still having a debate in this country about what this stuff means. I am going through this to try and show you the events that were happening at the same time that this second explosion of monuments in the South to Confederate heroes was being built. And then this happened in '63. Segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever, and just a few weeks later, the Confederate flag was flying over the University of Alabama. And in September of 1963, these 4 girls got blown up in this church. This was the young girl that survived. These are the faces of people watching the bodies being taken out of the church. This is what was happening as the second explosion of Confederate monuments was happening in America. So some of these statues are coming down. They're being removed in the dark of night because the city officials don't want to remove them in the day because there might be disputes, there might be violence, there might be fighting. My only point is this: there is a movement in America that has not been in existence in my lifetime. I was 11 years old in Memphis when King was shot and killed, and I was young, but I was old enough to know enough. And what I'm telling you is the discussions about racial equality that were going on then are nowhere near as deep, as intense, and as revealing as the discussions that are going on today. As scared as I feel and as frustrated as I feel with what's going on in this country, there is a part of me that says we are on the cusp of something. This is a freaking tipping point. And it is going to go one way or the other. Taking down these monuments will not cure the problem, but it is at least an indication that we are ready to deal with the truth.
I love this. This is a tipping point. And I'm really hoping that people are ready to deal with the truth. But it doesn't seem so from the White House. But one thing I want to go back and ask, Dr. Silver, is this the same Wilmington where just three white police officers were just fired for saying, let's kill these, and I hate to say it, blank niggas, and literally let's start a civil war. Is this the same Wilmington that we're talking about?
Dr. Butler, I wish I could tell you no, but it's absolutely the same city. And so we say history has a way of repeating itself, but this is Wilmington 2020, and he was espousing, those 3 officers were espousing to create a civil war. The difference is you have a chief of police who acted on it. He's an acting police chief and who happens to be an African-American man. Let me go back to something that the gentleman on the video was talking about. He couldn't recall the president that he was trying to make a point about. So let me help our audience out and talk about who that president was and why it's so important with the monuments, and then we'll come back to Wilmington. What he was talking about really is the election of 1876. In the election of 1876, that was a decision after Ulysses Grant decided that he was not going to run for a 3rd term, that Rutherford Hayes was a compromise candidate. And he was running against a person by the name of Tilden. We're talking about the role of the Electoral College. The Tilden versus Hayes election is critical about the understanding of the Electoral College today. Actually, Tilden got more votes than Hayes did, but there was a compromise. It's called the Compromise of 1876. And what the folk did was they made a deal with Hayes, and Hayes made a deal with them. And this is when we call it the end of Reconstruction. Reconstruction was a time that the gentleman just spoke about with 2,000 plus elected officials, the businesses and what have you. So this is a very key period in the American history. But the Compromise of 1876 was that the disputed electoral votes, which there were 20 electoral votes that Tilden really won. they made a deal with Hayes to say, okay, if we award the 20 votes to you, would you agree to remove the federal troops from the South? And he did. And that's the turning point right there, because when the troops were removed, the Confederacy rose again, and they began to play havoc on Black people from that point on. There was no protection. There was no protection. So the deal that was made to remove the troops is symbolic to the end of Reconstruction as we knew it. And so then it empowered this white supremacy attitude to come back into fruition. That's what he was trying to show us. That's what he was trying to show us. And nothing is different. Nothing is different. Think about the election with Gore and Bush.
Yes.
We know that that happened again. And guess what? Florida in 1876 was one of the disputed electoral votes. And now we see it happening again. Now we come full throttle to 2020 and look at what we saw in Wilmington. If folk had not kept those words that they had written on Facebook and other places, these guys would have been on the police force and still playing havoc on Black people, shooting Black unarmed men. I remember in my graduate program, there was a book by Ed Cray called Enemy on the Streets. Ed Cray, Enemy on the Streets. And the premise of the book was that African Americans and other minorities had an enemy on the street that they needed to be wary of. And what the enemy was uneducated policemen who were white supremacists, who were on the police force, who now had a badge and a gun and a license to kill. And now we see that there is documented evidence from the FBI that white supremacist groups are infiltrating the police across the country. It's not to say all policemen are bad, because they aren't, but they have some that have been infiltrated. And if you look at key videos, you see different signals that you see the white cops using. And then every time there's an issue of where a Black person was killed, somebody's in the background making that same signal. This is not by happenstance. This is not a coincidence. This is by design.
You know, I sit here and this is a wonderful history lesson, because a lot of this is not told, and they don't teach you this in school. And one of the things, you know, what can we do? I know we have to get out and vote. What are some of the other things that you can recommend that we do as a people of color? How can we move forward? Because we got to move forward, and this is the tipping point.
Well, we first have to take control of our own destiny. Mm-hmm. And we have to teach our history, because they're not going to teach it. I have a 2-year-old grandson whose vocabulary is not that good because he's 2 years old. But as he walks into my office, he can name every person that's on the wall. Why can he name every person on the wall? Because that's what we teach him. Who's the first person on that wall? Martin Luther King. Who's the next person? Gandhi. Who's the next one? Mother Teresa. Who's the next one? W.B. Du Bois. Who's the next one? Nelson Mandela. Who's the next one? Fannie Lou Hamer. Who's the next one? Rosa Parks. Who's the next one? Sojourner Truth. Who's the next one? Harriet Tubman. 2 years old. And he can recognize and name each one of those. Why? Because we teach him that. And you send the young people who can put all the rap songs together, and I have nothing against rap, it's because that's what they were taught. So we have to make sure that we teach our history. And we have to make sure that we are not apologetic. Because if even the thing that gets me about the politics of where we are right now is the so-called the evangelicals, the Christian right, who claims that they believe in all that is right and righteousness, but yet and still they're the ones that are perpetrating a lot of this stuff in their support of the person in the White House. If we go back to our history and know that where we all came from in Kemet, that's Black, that's Egypt, that's us. I took a group to China 2 years ago. Every other year I take a group around the world to the diaspora to make a point. And what I was trying to show them in China, that the first inhabitants of China were black folk. So we went into the caves and the mountains of China, and we saw on the walls the murals of folk from the Qing dynasty and before. And they look just like you, and they look just like me. Well, people are going to always say, oh, y'all making that stuff up. Well, they did DNA tests, and guess what? The DNA traces them right back to Africa. And so one of the things I do believe is that if we're going to solve the problems of the African American people, I think that the highway to that solution runs through Africa. But Africa must unite. Africa must unite. There are many people think about Africa as a country. Africa is not a country. Africa is a continent with many countries. Countries that were divided in the Berlin Agreement, where you have the French and the English fussing over the property. You got South Sudan, North Sudan. Well, that's because the imperial folk and the imperialist folk came in and they took the land. They divided the people. Look at Eritrea and Ethiopia. It used to be one land, but it was divided. You can go over and over and over again. The Congo. The point that I'm making is that if now that these are independent countries, starting with Ghana in 57, they're independent, but they're doing business as independent countries with the United States, with China, with Russia. They're not positioned, it's an unequal agreement. And so they always get taken advantage of. Look at what's going on in Africa today. China is buying Africa one country at a time with the big loans that they are making. These countries would never be able to pay these loans back. So my position is that if Africa unite and become one strong country and they negotiate as a country, one big united Africa, they will take the United States, China, Russia to lunch and eat their lunch. But as long as they're separated, it's going to be a problem. There was a young lady, and I hate that I forget her name. She's the immediate past ambassador to the African Union. She's
on this program.
Dr. Ericana.
Yes, she is brilliant. I met her at the embassy in Ghana. I heard her speak. I heard her program. She is simply one of the most progressive people. I didn't say women. I said one of the progressive people I've ever met. Guess what? The world knew she was progressive too. And that's why France caused her demise to be tumbled from the presidency or the ambassador to the African Union. That's a problem. If you're going to say we're going to unite as a nation of Africans, meaning the continent of Africa coming together as one, then we cannot allow France to control the African Union through their finances. They simply threatened the union and say, we will withdraw our funds if you don't make her go away. That's been our problem historically, and that's been our problem today. We got a few folk who can be bought off very easily, and then they go and talk the message that the white folk want them to talk. There is a book by the person who groomed me as a young man and a young political scientist, Dr. Mac Henry Jones, an article that he wrote called The Black Caretakers of the White Experience. The Black Caretakers of the White Experience, written by Mac Henry Jones, a noted political scientist and just a huge scholar. And what he was saying is that white folk don't have to do certain things to us anymore because we have black caretakers for them who will go and do it for us. And so who do they have speaking for the crime bill in Washington, D.C. now? Scott.
Yes.
Who do we have supporting Graham on the suppression of votes? Scott. They don't need white folk to stand out in front of them because they got black folk who would be willing to go out there and sell their soul for 2 pieces of silver.
Dr. Silver.
Well, let me get a caller on the line. We have a caller on the line, Brother Z. So let's get the caller in, and then keep your thought, Brother Z. We have a caller on, and I want to get you and Dr. Eric Khan on this call together. On this, and I'm gonna try to work on that, Dr. Silver. So, caller, are you there? Can you please say your name, your first name, and where you're calling from? You're live.
I'm actually organizer for African Forum regarding immigrant experience in New York City of Pansa Pansa Forum. So I'm so happy and I'm so glad that I'm able to tune in into this show and listen to this discussion because this is very, very important.
And do you have a question, caller?
Yes, I do. I just want to make a comment.
Yes.
Yeah, the comment is that, I'm so happy for this discussion because as an immigrant myself who went to school in this country and I took classes in Black Studies, a lot of things that I got to understand about the struggle of African American community actually came from the outside. I had to listen to other lectures like Dr. Eric Clark, Dr. Ben, who actually connect the African immigrants as well as the African in the continent and the struggle of the African American. So I am so happy to hear this, and I wish we could work together because we people of African descent need to come together to start addressing some of the miseducation that is being given to our people through colonization, as well as, during the time of slavery up till the present. So it's time for the struggle, and I'm really willing to work with anybody who wants to, come together so that we could gather a lot of African intellectuals together and say, how can we write a curriculum for the African, people of African descent in America here, as well as, abroad, so that we come up with the same curriculum that people of African descent will learn from. It will be part of the package of our curriculum so that we understand and we know each other's struggle. So thank you so much for taking my call.
Let me take callers. Thank you so much for your comment. And on that note, I really want, if you can please put your can you please send your name and your email in, because that is something that we are focusing on as we speak, bringing us together as one. And we have a Pan-Africanist on the panel today here with us, Dr. Silver. He is a 100% Pan-Africanism and really trying to bring us together. So caller, could you please make sure we get your full name and your email and your contact information so we can stay in contact, because this is something that we're working on right now, because we are one. And we have to make sure the divisiveness stops. And especially as people come in as immigrants to this country, not knowing the history, they need to understand that we need to work together and we need to unify. So Dr. Silver, you want to make any more comments? And I know, Brother Zeke, you also had a comment.
I want to raise a question. Go ahead, Dr. Silver.
I just want people to make the connection between the earlier comment that I made about the demographics in terms of why we see the aggressive voter suppression and what have you. They may be wicked and mean and treat us bad, but one thing they can do is count. And so those who are demographers have an easy job because they count who is born and who dead, who died, okay? So the same people who are making the policies in the White House now, they can count too. There is a realistic correlation between the policies on immigration and their ability to count. So where do you think they're suppressing the immigrants coming from? Folk who look like us in Haiti, in Latino countries, in Hispanic countries, but yet and still we see that they were still opening welcome arms, those from Europe and other places, because they can count. And what they think is that when the numbers change, that we would treat them like they treated us. But that's not going to be the case. One of the things about Black folk, to a fault, is that we forgive. But what they're thinking is it's going to be a zero-sum game. And if we're in control, then that means that we're going to do what they did to us. And I don't think that's going to be the case. I think we're going to be a progressive group of individuals. So I do want to hear from my invisible co-host. I can't see him, but I can.
I got a couple of questions for you.
Yes, sir.
You said you were in China. What city? And how long did you stay?
I was in Beijing. I was in Shanghai. I was in Hutang. I was in the northern Providence. I took a boat ride down the Yangtze River and stopped at every port. I was there for 3 weeks. Yes, but that was not my first time there. I've been to China at least 5 to 6 times.
Well, I spent a decade there.
Fantastic.
And when you mentioned about them understanding where they came from, I was talking with students and I said, where the black people? I said, oh, we don't have any. But Dr. Henry Lee, who was the geneticist who worked with the OJ case.
Yes.
He was part of a group that tried to say that the Chinese people developed differently, but it all, as you said, led back to us. You know, the original ancestors of China and everywhere else, they are of us.
That's correct.
Yes, sir.
That's undefeatable. That's undefeatable.
Yes, sir.
DNA is definite on that.
The next thing I wanted to share with you before the time runs out, what the current president said today. He said when he signed the executive order, he said, I just had the privilege of signing a very strong executive order protecting American monuments, memorials, and statues, and combating recent criminal violence. And could you address why he would have to do that? And you talked about the time changing. So if you could address that.
Well, see, you got to understand what the dog whistle is all about. That was a dog whistle. And he was signaling to his base that I got your back. The bottom line is that he has been the most divisive president in the history of this country. Yes. And the difference is that he's doing it in plain sight. So as much as I blame him, I blame the Senate even more, because they have been the blockers and they have been the enablers for him. And the bottom line is that they understand, and he understands, that statement was nothing more than a signal to his base to say, hey, we can keep dividing these folk if you keep me in this office. That's why I'm saying that we got to turn out and show out in November in big numbers. So the only poll, and here's what I want black folk to understand, African Americans to understand, do not pay attention to these polls. Do not pay attention to these polls. Biden is up by 2 digits.
Yes, sir.
What they're doing is trying to lull you to sleep, thinking that, okay, there'll be enough folk out there to vote to get Biden in. No, you saw what happened in 16. It can happen again. And the problem is that many of the other folk, quote unquote, who will smile in your face, they'll go to that poll and they'll pull the lever for the same person who's in the position now. We have to turn the vote around by going out in massive. No if and or buts about it.
Well, Dr. Silver, we have 2 more people on the line. Let's just try to get them on real quick. Can we get the first caller, and we'll take both questions at the same time so you can answer them collectively. So first caller, could you please say your name, where you're calling from, and your question, please?
Yeah, Dr. Pam Queen from Maryland.
Welcome. Thank you, Delegate Queen. How are you?
How you doing, Dr. Queens? I know her.
I'm good, and yourself?
And your question, please?
Sure. I would really like to say one hi to Dr. Silver. This is Pam Queen from Morgan State. How are you? And now I'm a state delegate. I really would like to know, how can we get the message you're bringing, give you an opportunity to come talk to some of the state delegations, especially the legislative Black caucus we have in Maryland and Virginia and so forth. I think it would be great to kind of hear your message. So maybe we can talk about how can we have some sort of collaboration with our Blacks in government.
Well, that's an easy question to answer. You can do just like Dr. Butler do. Just pick up the phone and call me and say, I need you to be here on Friday at 7 o'clock. And I say, yes, ma'am.
Apparently, we will get him here. He's been here for a few times, and I've had the pleasure and just the honor of being able to have him on our show in a previous show, and also come to Silver Spring, actually. So we will definitely get him here.
I would love to work with her and to speak to her audience. No problem. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for your question. There was another caller on the line. Next question, please. Please state your name, where you're calling from. We have another caller on the line. Can you hear us? Okay, I'm not sure if the other caller has has gone off. But while we try to get the other caller on the line, let's go ahead. So we have to get you here for Delegate Pam Queen, because your message needs to be heard, and not enough people know the things that you're telling us, and we truly need to come together. And you have a book coming out. Am I correct?
Yes, I do. As if I needed something else to do in the midst of all this pandemic. I had the occasion to speak at the National Conference of Black Political Scientists as the keynote speaker, and I was not the person who was supposed to be keynote speaker. The person who was supposed to speak, his wife was ill, and it was on the front end of this pandemic, and he didn't want to take anything back, so he told the group, "I can't come." I just happened to be there on the celebration of the professor that I just talked about, Mac Jones, was being honored, and they asked me would I fill in. And so I told them I would. And so this was at 1:30 in the afternoon, and the speech was supposed to be at 6 o'clock. So they asked me, well, just go and speak about yourself and talk about what you did as a political scientist to move from an instructor to a president of the university to now owning your firm. I said, that's the last thing I want to talk about. But I will put something together. So I put something together on the pandemic, and this was before all the numbers were out. I think it was only 6 deaths in America at the time, and it hadn't even reached 100 cases, maybe 2 deaths rather, hadn't even reached 100 cases. And I said it to the group, I want to talk about pandemic, public health, race, and class. And I want to tell you what I think this pandemic is going to do on a race and class issue. And what I want you all to do is, after I'm finished, I want you to go out and write about it. Well, since I gave them the charge, I felt like I had to honor that and write about it myself. So I have a book coming out. I sent it to the publisher this week, and so we're hoping that next month it'll be out. And it's called Pandemic, Public Health, Race, and Class, The American Challenge. And so one of the chapters talks about the pandemic and how it started. The second one is very interesting to me because it's called the American Leadership, Starting from Behind. And what I'm saying is that we did not have, and we do not have today, the leadership in Washington, in the White House, to lead us through this pandemic. As a matter of fact, that leadership is causing more deaths, as we can see the spikes going on. Yeah. The next chapter I talk about is the impact. No sector has been spared from this virus. Whether you're talking about the sports sector, the economic sector, the tourists, whatever, all these sectors. So I kind of bring that in. Then the fourth chapter is called The Same Virus, Different Impact. The Same Virus, Different Impact, Race and Class. So I look at how this whole thing comes about and how and why Black folk are being targeted more. The virus is not targeting us. It's the system, because the virus is just exposing these things, exposing the fact that we don't have adequate health care, exposing the digital divide where now we're asking folk to be online to teach and learn when Black children don't even have computer or access to the internet. What does that do? It puts us further behind. And then I close with a very interesting chapter, which I call, What Did We Learn from the Virus, COVID-19, but what should have we learned? And I did it in a different way. I take quotes from very, very famous people, African-American people, put their quotes into a context of what we should have done for mitigation of this virus. So I'm excited about it.
Wonderful.
And hopefully you all will read it when it comes out.
Well, Dr. Silva, I don't want to cut you off. We have another call. The caller's back online. This is going to be our last question. Caller, can you please state your name and where you're calling from and ask your question? We have a few more minutes, and Dr. Silva, this could be the last question. Caller, are you there? A few more minutes, and Dr. Silva, this could be the last question. Caller, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Yes,
Can you please state your name and where you're calling from, please, caller?
And ask the question.
Yes,
and ask your question.
I'm calling from Maryland. My question for Dr. Silva is that he said we should go and vote. and I appreciate that. But we of the black people of African descent here in the United States, we have been always voting for Democrats. We have been spending all our time putting Democrats in power. But they don't, when they get to power, they don't take our issue. They just use it. I can say of it in Maryland or in Montgomery. We spend our time putting people in power, going to churches, doing the. But when
Okay,
they,
let me respond to that because our time is limited. I want to respond to
even single black organization that they funded them to help our own people. Why should we?
I want to respond to that before we go out because this is very key.
Yes, caller, let him respond. Let him respond.
This is doing. We know that Democrats have not.
All right, so caller, let Dr. Silver respond. Go ahead, Dr. Silver.
And we know the Democrats and Republicans have played us over the years.
Yes.
But believe me, we're going to have to deal with that, but we don't need to deal with it in this election. You know, what I'm saying is very clear. There's a very clear choice in terms of a Biden versus a Trump. 4 more years of Trump, this caller that just called, all of us will be on our knees. And what I'm saying to him is this: your point is well taken. But this is not the time to divide the vote. It's just not. Whatever issues we have with the vote in the past and what Democrats have done and what the Republicans have done, the bottom line is neither one of them have done anything. But this is not the time to draw the line in the sand. We need to go out and get this guy out of office, period. That's the end result. I do believe with Clyburn backing Biden and really Clyburn actually giving him the thrust to get over the hump in Super Tuesday, he owes black folks something, and we will hold him accountable. The reason Democrats take us for granted is because we do not hold them accountable once they're elected. We have to do something about that. But we don't need to divide the black community on this issue right now. We need to get the man in the White House out of the White House, and the next step is to have that conversation that the caller just gave us.
Thank you to Dr. Silver. We're going to wrap it up. And I said, you gave us some really good things that we need to do and forward on. First thing, we need to get out and vote. Second thing, we have to create our own destinies, everyone. And I want to make sure that people really think about, and I want to take charge. I want to say, please, all those individuals, if you're on this line, if you're organizing a protest or doing anything else, please get the voter registration folks in line with you and have them out there registering people to vote. And I agree with Dr. Silver, this is the time for us to make sure we turn that White House over, make sure we put people in the Democrats in the Senate so there won't be a stalemate, make sure we keep the House Democratic, and then we hold these people accountable who we put in office. Because, caller, you're right, we haven't had the respect and we haven't had the forthcoming of what we should have in this country, because we should be further ahead economically. And every time someone gets in office, they do take advantage of us, but we have to make sure we start holding accountable every public official that we put in office, especially now with the tipping point. As they say, this is the tipping point of where this country is going to go. And we have to make sure that we make a change. Any last words from you, Dr. Silver? And then we're going to wrap up. And I want to thank Afrique Today again, and my co-host. If there's any last words, because I will stop. I won't say any words after this. I'll let my co-host and Dr. Silver take it out.
My last words in terms of why it's important for us to vote. In the last 3 years, the person in the White House has appointed 200 federal judges, 200, and 2 Supreme Court judges. Long after he's gone, we're going to feel the impact of that. I'm looking at some of the judges who have been selected, no background whatsoever in things that impact us. We need to turn the tide on that. So I want to hear from our invisible host now. Thank you.
Oh, I just want to say that you are a fountain of knowledge, and I appreciate being on the show with you. I hope the next time we can bring out the difference in the name of Afro descendant descendants from Africa and so forth, because there's a whole lot to talk about. So I hope to see you again, sir.
And the operative word is we hope to see you too, Invisible Man.
Well, thank you, everyone. And I want to thank all my callers. I know we couldn't get to all the calls. We'll start having call-in earlier, but remember, we're here every Friday. Next Friday, we are your hosts. I'm Dr. Yvette Butler, your bull, and my co-host, Invisible Man. We're here every Friday at 7 o'clock. Next week, it's going to be about Pan-Africanism and how we move forward together. And we're really excited about what's happening in the country now, and we got to take advantage of it. Thank you so much again, Dr. Silver.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Silver.
Thank you, Invisible Man. Thank you, Dr. Butler. Thank you for hosting me.
Thank you.
Want to promote your business? Do you want to talk about your nonprofit organization? Do you want to talk about your culture? Introducing the online web TV, Afrique Today. Fogham. You can watch us live at the same time on 4 platforms: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and using the Afrique Today app. Download our app today for Android or Apple. Promote your business today. For more information, go to www.afriquetoday.com. Afrique Today, the best of digital TV.
L'entrepreneuriat digital vous intéresse-t-il? Vous voulez apprendre à construire des projets digitaux? Aimeriez-vous gagner des revenus passifs conséquents en tout lieu? Voici la plateforme des professionnels du digital, la Diaspo Academy. Ici, vous retrouverez les meilleurs professionnels de la diasporama mondiale connectés sur notre plateforme. Vous allez pouvoir acquérir des formations adéquates qui feront de vous des entrepreneurs digitaux compétents. Étudiants, entrepreneurs, coachs, instructeurs et entreprises, Diaspo Academy est une opportunité pour vous. Elle vous offre la possibilité de suivre votre formation en mode virtuel à partir de chez vous, où que vous soyez sur la planète. Toutes nos formations disponibles en ligne sont dispensées de manière interactive. Il suffit de vous inscrire et vous pourrez les suivre depuis chez vous. Au cours de la formation, vous passerez des quiz et examens selon votre parcours. En outre, à partir de votre tableau de bord, vous suivrez vos performances et progressions. Vous pourrez aussi communiquer avec vos instructeurs et recevoir des notifications. À la fin de votre parcours de formation, vous recevrez un certificat Diaspo Academy Certified. Que vous soyez débutant ou responsable d'entreprise, Diaspo Academy est une opportunité pour vous. Saisissez-la! Enfin, que vous soyez coach ou instructeur, ayez accès à un millier d'étudiants à travers notre plateforme. Merci de choisir Diaspo Academy, le meilleur choix. Pour plus d'informations, allez sur www.diaspoacademy.com. Diaspo Academy, la plateforme des professionnels du digital.
ESYDA returned to play summer clinics. Recreation, Tuesday and Thursday, 6 to 8 p.m. Travel team, EDP, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday. Time, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Free mask and water bottle. Register today at esYDA.org. Email info@ESYDA. Phone 248-765-9369. Office 301-800-7848. Toll free 800-995-5532. Free registration for all summer clinics. All new players need buy uniforms. We're following COVID-19 soccer guidelines. Small group practice with 9 players and 1 coach. For more information, go to esyda.org.
Looking to start a rewarding career? Call Gandhi Healthcare today to earn your certification as a nursing assistant, dental assistant, pharmacy technician, phlebotomy technician, and many more. We offer no interest payment plans, scholarships, and tuition reimbursements for those that qualify. Located right in the heart of Pikesville on Reicherstown Road and McHenry Avenue in the Pikesville Shopping Center. It offers immediate access from 695, accessible to public transportation on the 83 and 89 bus line. We offer morning, evening, and weekend classes to fit your schedule. Earn your certification in as little as 5 weeks. We are now offering classes online and on-site. Hurry, classes start soon, so enroll today. Visit us online at gandhihealthcare.com or call 443-352-8030.
Do you want to promote your business? Do you want to talk about your nonprofit organization? Do you want to talk about your culture? Introducing the online web TV, Afrique Today. Fogham. You can watch us live at the same time on 4 platforms: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and using the Afrique Today app. Download our app today for Android or Apple. Promote your business today. For more information, go to www.afriquetoday.com. Afrique Today, the best of digital TV.